In my previous life, the werewolf I had contracted with was trapped in a sea of fire. In order to save him, I didn't hesitate to destroy half of my face. However, on our wedding day, he publicly broke off the engagement in front of everyone. An ugly woman with a disfigured face dares to dream of becoming the wife of a powerful werewolf like me? After that, he turned around and married my sister and ended my life with his own hands. After my reincarnation, on the day of choosing the beast man, I resolutely pointed to the corner of the room, where a small white dog was cowering and trembling. I said, "I choose this dog." The werewolf frowned, blocking my way. "Dogs are both stupid and weak, you should choose the wolf." He didn't know that the weak dog he despised would later become the king who ruled both the human and beast man worlds. What are you still standing there for? It's your turn to choose. Hearing my father's voice, I suddenly opened my eyes. Before my eyes, rows of beast men and beast dragons appeared. The scene was as familiar as in my memory. I reached out to touch my face. My face was still intact, not destroyed. At this moment, I clearly realized that I had been reborn. Back to the day of choosing beastmen in this world. When humans were 18 years old, they all had to choose a beastman as their guardian. Although I was taught from a young age that humans and beastmen were equal, but looking at the scene of each beastman locked in a narrow cage, covered in injuries, I realized that teaching was just a lie to cover up injustice. Humans and beastmen have always had a relationship of choosing and being chosen. How could it be called equality? At this moment, the werewolf Lockenwin wagged his tail happily through the bars, looking at me with kindness. Right now, he was just a teenager, about 10 years old. His eyes looking at me were enthusiastic and pure. But I glanced past him, my eyes falling on a corner, where a small dog was curled up. It was Jiang Lin. Jiang Lin seemed to have suffered a lot of damage. His white fur was soaked in blood, so weak that it seemed like he would die the next second. "I've chosen," I said. Hearing that, Lu Yuan's tail wagged even harder. He was clearly full of confidence. Lu Yuan was the strongest and healthiest beastman here. He was certain that I would choose him. But I was indifferent, ignoring his expectant gaze, resolutely pointing at Jiang Lin, the weakest one, and said, "I choose him." Lu Yuan was stunned, immediately flustered, and quickly stood between me and Jiang Lin. "Dogs are both stupid and weak, you should have chosen wolves." Hearing that, I just calmly looked at him, smiling coldly. Even if they are stupid, even if they are weak, they are still better than ungrateful wolves. Actually, I knew that Jiang Lin was not an ordinary dog. Let's see if Lu Yuan would dare to say that dogs were both stupid and weak when Jiang Lin crushed them under his feet. My decision quickly spread throughout the country. Everyone laughed at me, saying that the second young lady of the Lu family was crazy and chose the weakest dog to be her protector. They sarcastically said that I had lost all face for the family. I didn't care. I lowered my head to look at Jiang Lin, who was lying weakly in my arms. The corners of my lips curled up into a slight smile. How could they know that the dog that everyone looked down on today would be the ruler of both the human and beast worlds in a few years? "You shouldn't have chosen me," Jiang Lin whispered, her voice weaker than her breath. "Beast men and humans don't grow at the same rate." At the age of 16, Jiang Lin looked like a 12 to 13-year-old child, skinny beyond belief. I gently lifted his face, looking at the wounds all over. "Are you afraid of dying? It's okay. You were chosen by me. From today on, I am your master. Whether you live or die is up to me." Jiang Lin looked at me blankly. I knew he was surprised. I was completely different from the image of the second young lady of the Lu family, the gentle and soft person that everyone rumored. In my previous life, because I valued love and righteousness too much, I did not hesitate to destroy half of my face to save Locke and Gwen from the sea of fire. The result was the scene where he publicly broke off the engagement on our wedding day and my tragic death when he bit my neck because of the girl he loved. Clenching my fists. If I were reborn once, I would definitely take back everything that belonged to me. I would not spare any of those who had hurt me. Jianglin still seemed to not believe that I had chosen him. I looked at his stunned expression, reached out and pinched the soft animal ear. What did I just say? Did you hear it clearly? Jianglin nodded slightly. I heard it clearly, master. His face turned red, and his neck couldn't help but turn red. Lu Yuan growled fiercely. Lu Xingjing. Only I am worthy of being the guardian of the Lu family. Why didn't you choose me? Are you blind? I turned around and glared at him. Before I could reply, Jianglin had already escaped from my arms, transformed into a beast, and charged forward, biting hard on Lu Yuan's arm. His teeth weren't sharp enough, leaving only a faint mark on Lu Yuan's skin. Lu Yuan was furious, intending to attack Jianglin, but I immediately blocked in front of him, raised my hand and slapped Lu Yuan hard across the face. If you want to touch him, you must first see who his master is. The force of my slap was so strong that half of Lu Yuan's face immediately turned red. He stopped being arrogant, revealing a defeated expression for the first time. Lu Xingjing. How could you treat me like this? I frowned slightly, suddenly realizing something. It turned out that Lu Yuan had also reincarnated like me. That was even better. At this moment, he had nothing in his hands. It was the best time for me to make him pay double the price. I turned to the owner of the farm, and said coldly. Your beast man doesn't seem to be very obedient, huh? The owner of the farm was so scared that he trembled, and hurriedly swung his whip at Lu Yuan's face, locking him in an iron cage. Lu Yuan had no way to dodge, and could only scream in pain. Looking at his face that was beaten until it was mixed with flesh and blood, I smiled with satisfaction. This life, it's his turn to have a ruined face. My mood was much better. I squatted down and patted Jianglin's head. What a good dog. Jianglin lowered his head, not daring to look directly at me, but the tail that was wagging back and forth behind him had already revealed his joy. At this time, when I returned to the Lu family home, I ignored everyone's strange looks and immediately called the family doctor to take care of Jianglin. When the doctor arrived, I said seriously, in a month, I want to see him fully recovered. After that, I rummaged through the drawers, found the best tonics, told Aunt Wang to cook a bowl of tonic soup every day, and personally forced Jianglin to drink it all. Thanks to that, Jianglin's body recovered very quickly. The previous injuries almost disappeared, and he was gradually able to maintain his human form for longer, revealing the appearance of a white-haired, handsome-faced teenager. Thinking about Jianglin's future, I invited the best teachers to teach him. In addition to studying, I also arranged for him to attend martial arts, boxing, painting, and piano classes. I took care of him like an ambitious mother, wanting him to develop comprehensively in morality, intelligence, physical fitness, and art. Everyone in the Lu family was surprised by my change. Seeing Jianglin's tight schedule, they whispered, "Second Miss is really strange. This is not bringing a beast man home, it's clearly welcoming a young master home." My older sister, Lu Ruyan, heard that I brought a weak beast man home, and immediately came to watch the joke. Lu Tran, she sneered. On the outside, people always say that humans and beast men are equal. But in your heart, you must know that humans will always be one level higher than beast men. If you pamper your guardian like this, won't he no longer know the status of master and servant? As she spoke, she swung her whip and lashed hard at the back of her beast man, a large tiger, 2 heads taller than her. This was the guardian she had carefully chosen when she was 18, a lord of beasts. But this majestic and imposing tiger had now been tamed by her to the point that it was no different from a cat without its fangs. I understood Lu Rian's methods in taming beastmen. Otherwise, in her previous life, she would not have driven Lu Yuan crazy. She even bit my neck to please her. But now, I only bowed my head slightly and continued. Flipped the book and calmly replied, "Do you know why beastmen live longer than humans?" Lu Rian paused, reflexively asking, "Why?" I raised my head, looked at her, and smiled faintly. Because they never meddle in other people's business. Such a simple argument, the beast man could understand, but she didn't. For the first time, Lu Rian was speechless in front of me, so angry that she stomped her feet. Her guardian sensed her master's agitation, immediately roared, and rushed towards me. When the tiger's fangs were less than an inch away from me, a white figure rushed out from the corner of the room. I looked closely, it turned out to be Jiang Lin. After not seeing him for a few days, he had grown much taller. Now he looked like a 17, 18-year-old teenager. I only saw Jiang Lin lightly jump up, a strong kick causing the beastman's fangs to fall to the ground. Lu Rian was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, angrily shouting, "Lu Qingjin, you dare let your beastman touch my guardian?" I calmly replied, "Are you blind? I wasn't the one who attacked first." Lu Rian was choked, she laughed coldly, and swung the whip straight at Jiang Lin. "In that case, today I will teach you a lesson, let's see if this stray dog dares to act recklessly again." The whip came out, lashing hard on Jiang Lin's body, leaving behind streaks of bright red blood. Beside her, Aunt Wang hurriedly advised, "Second miss, quickly ask the eldest miss to stop. Jiang Lin's body has just recovered, it cannot take any more damage." Jiang Lin just silently looked at me. His eyes were slightly drooping, full of pity, his wet eyes seemed to be begging, but I just indifferently raised my eyes, and softly said, "Jiang Lin, whose dog are you?" His eyes immediately lit up. I continued, "Resist, Jiang Lin. You must always remember that in this world, the only person who has the right to decide your life or death is me. The only person you need to be loyal to and obey is also me. I need Jiang Lin to learn how to resist, but at the same time, I have to make sure he stays loyal to me forever. Only when he crosses this line himself will he truly become my absolutely loyal protector. And once the master-servant contract is decided, I will protect him for life." Jiang Lin seemed to sense my thoughts. His ears twitched slightly, then he knelt down in front of me, his eyes filled with extreme respect. Jiang Lin was Lu Zhizhen's dog. Lu Rian saw this and became even angrier. She swung the whip down again, but Jiang Lin did not turn his head. He just gently reached out to grab the whip that was falling, the action simple but decisive. I smiled with satisfaction, reached out to touch the wound on his body, then leaned down, placed a light kiss on the corner of his mouth, and said, "Good boy, my good dog." Jiang Lin raised his head, his eyes blazing. The rays of light in his eyes seemed to be intersecting, containing an irrepressible power. From this moment on, the will to rebel and the ambition within him were burning. The shadow of the king who had ruled both worlds in his previous life had now gradually taken shape. It must be said that nurturing a great villain from the West was truly a very interesting experience. Lu Rian gritted her teeth and angrily shouted, "A lowly beast man like you dares to oppose humans?" As she spoke, she tried to pull the whip back, intending to continue hitting Jiang Lin. But Jiang Lin only waved his hand lightly, the whip immediately left her hand and lashed hard at her own hand, leaving a bright red mark. Lu Rian's painful scream rang out. Her face, which had always maintained a noble and elegant appearance, was now distorted in anger. Her eyes were like a poisonous snake, full of cruelty. Lu Chan, you dare to indulge your beast man like that? Wait until I tell your father and your dog, don't expect to live in peace. Hearing that, I just felt amused. I had already died once, what else was there to be afraid of? Now I was not afraid of anything. Besides, the one who made the first move was not Jiang Lin. I smiled faintly and replied, Sister, my dog is obedient, loyal, and wholeheartedly protects its master. So what's wrong? On the contrary, your beast man doesn't know manners, is extremely rude, and even dares to touch the second young lady of the Lu family. People often say that beast men have the same temperament as their master. It seems to be true. Lu Ruyan's face turned from green to white, her expression extremely unique. She couldn't bear the fact that I, the younger sister she had always bullied, was now standing on top of her. Her anger made her lose all reason, raising her hand to hit me. Jiang Lin was about to rush out to protect me, but I gave him a slight signal with my eyes, and he immediately stopped at that moment. My father's powerful voice rang out. He suddenly appeared, grabbed Lu Rian's hand, stopping the blow before she could react. I gently rubbed my eyes, pretending that tears were about to fall. Dad, it's my fault. I don't know what I did to make you so angry. I said softly, my voice choked with resentment. The role of the pitiful daughter, the role that Lu Rian loved so much in her previous life, I now held perfectly. Confusion was evident on Lu Rian's face. It was clear that she was not used to seeing me play the role of a green tea girl like she used to. The confusion made her stand there stunned. This made my father even angrier. He pushed her hand away, pointed straight at her face and shouted, All day long you only know how to cause trouble over and over again. Now you bully your sister, haven't I taught you a lesson for too long? No. I gently wiped the corner of my eyes, pretending to wipe away my tears and glanced at Lu Rian who was trembling with fear. In her previous life, she always pretended to be pitiful, going everywhere acting weak to gain sympathy and love from everyone. But in this life, I would go one step ahead, taking away that path so that she would have no way out. Thinking of this, I gave a secret smile, causing Lu Rian's face to turn pale with anger. She tried to defend herself, Father, it was her beast man who didn't respect me first. Hearing this, my father couldn't help but immediately become angry. Lu Rian, do you think I'm blind? You always indulged your beast man to cause so much trouble outside, in the end it was the Lu family that had to clean up. Let me tell you, if anything else happens, you and your beast man will get out of the Lu family immediately. My father rarely got so angry, making Lu Rian so scared that she knelt down, not daring to say another word. This scene surprised me. I used to think that my father didn't know her true nature, but it turned out that he had realized everything long ago. Perhaps because he felt guilty. Towards her, he always tried to pamper her as much as possible. Lu Rian was my father's illegitimate daughter with an outside lover. My mother was the main wife of the Lu family. However, Lu Rian never had the consciousness of an illegitimate child. In her heart, my mother was the one who robbed her mother of the opportunity to legitimately enter the Lu family. And I, this younger sister, had robbed her of the love and property that should have belonged to her. Such unreasonable and selfish thoughts made me want to roll my eyes. But to avoid being discovered by my father that I was acting, I continued to pretend to wipe my tears. Jiang Lin looked at me worriedly and said softly, Master, don't cry anymore. With that, he stuck out his tongue and licked the corner of my eye. The sudden wet feeling startled me. You idiot, I glared at him and said softly, "We humans know how to pretend to cry." The following month, the Li family held a grand birthday party for their eldest son, Li Tianshan. Many prestigious families, including the Lu family, were present at the party. Jiang Lin and I appeared at the party, immediately attracting everyone's attention, especially Jiang Lin. Who would have thought that the weak little dog that was barely alive in the past, had now become a refined man, wearing a neat suit. Every move exuded a noble and charming demeanor. Under my training over the past few months, he had completely changed. As long as I praised him with the words "good dog," "smart," he would not sleep, studying diligently day and night. So now, his knowledge has reached the level of a human master. In terms of physical strength, with the guidance of professional trainers, his strength has also reached its peak. Last time, Lu Ruiyan's tiger beastman caused trouble for no reason. Jiang Lin didn't hesitate, punching him straight into the hospital. Everyone praised my trusting gaze, saying that I really knew how to teach a beastman. Lu Ruiyan was so angry that she almost crushed Zhang's jaw. She secretly forced her beastman to learn. But how could a tiger that had been trained to the point of being like livestock learn anything? Its brain wasn't even as good as a dog's, and it couldn't win in a fight. She cursed her beastman. Her gaze towards the beastman was filled with more and more hatred. As for the beastman's gaze towards her, besides fear, there was also a hint of resentment. I knew that my goal was gradually being achieved. However, at the birthday party of the young master of the Li family, I encountered an unexpected person, Lu Yuan. He was wearing a black uniform, half of his face was covered by a mask, standing at the door looking like a bodyguard. He also saw me, but before he could say anything, I curled my lips and smiled coldly. "Long time no see, this mask suits you very well. After all, in your previous life you had to wear a mask every day. It was me, and in this life the karma is reversed. It's not unfair at all, right?" Lu Yuan's eyes were complicated, both sad and resentful. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have treated you like that before. Can you take me away from the Li family? I can't take it anymore." The Li family was famous for their cruel mistreatment of beastmen. The current head of the family, Li Tianshan, was a cruel person, who enjoyed forcing beastmen to fight each other for entertainment. A ferocious werewolf like Lu Yuan would definitely be thrown into the arena every day, fighting to the death with other beastmen. Under that neat uniform, there was probably not a single piece of intact flesh left. I learned from the way he used to mock me in my previous life, and said gently, "Lu Yuan, you have now lost your face." But young Master Li still looked at them. He spent money to buy him out of the beastmen. He should be grateful to him. Lu Yuan's eyes were red with anger. "You don't know how I live in the Li family. It's like living in hell. I'm no different from an animal." I laughed coldly. "You're already an animal." My words were like a knife stabbing straight into him. Lu Yuan was so angry that he grabbed my wrist. His strength seemed to explode, but the next second, a cracking sound rang out. Then his hand was broken. Jiang Lin stood next to me, frowning in annoyance, his eyes cold as ice. "Are you looking for death?" Lu Yuan looked at me painfully, a faint glimmer of hope in his eyes, as if waiting for me to do something to protect him like in my previous life. But I didn't even bother to glance at him. I just took out a wet towel from my pocket, gave it to Jiang Lin and said, "You just touched something dirty, wipe your hands." Seeing my different treatment, Lu Yuan's heart felt like it was being torn apart. "I really know I'm wrong, can you please forgive me? Don't be angry with me anymore. We were clearly very good before." I coldly replied, "I'm a reincarnation, not an amnesiac. In my previous life, the second young lady of the Lu family, who was praised as Quin Quoc Quinton, in order to save a lowly werewolf like him, became an ugly monster that could make children cry. But not only did Lu Yuan not thank me, he also often made fun of the scar on my face and bullied me in every way. On the wedding day, he even humiliated me in front of everyone. "You ugly, disfigured person like you, dare to dream of being a werewolf's wife?" In this life, he still has the face to come near me. He is truly shameless. How can I forgive a traitor? I turned my head to look at him, my eyes filled with contempt. An ugly wolf whose face has been destroyed, dares to dream of being the guardian of the second young lady of the Lu family? My words and eyes clearly stabbed his heart. Lu Yuan's whole body trembled, his voice pleading, "Don't look at me like that. Do you know how much your eyes hurt me?" Before he could finish his sentence, Jiang Lin threw a punch directly at his eyes, coldly saying, "If you feel hurt, then don't look anymore." With that, he pulled me away, leaving Lu Yuan rolling on the ground, his hands covering his painful eyes in a hidden corner. "Little dog," rarely showing jealousy, he asked his master, "Did you and him know each other before?" Jiang Lin put his hands against the wall, trapping me in a corner. For the first time, the way he looked at me was no longer pure and innocent, but mixed with complex possessiveness. I reached out to grab his face that was close to mine, and said sternly, "Who gave you permission to treat your master like that?" But Jiang Lin didn't let go, and kept blinking at me as if he was determined to get an answer. I turned my head again, pointing towards the stage. "Li Tianshan is up, come and give him the congratulatory gift." I couldn't help but admit that my mother was right. Unlike wolves, dogs are truly the most loyal and sincere creatures. At this moment, even though he wasn't happy, Jiang Lin still listened and let go of my hand. "Good boy." I smiled, reaching out to stroke his head. In an instant, his gloomy eyes turned into sparkling stars. His voice was filled with excitement, "Master, I will always be this obedient." Those words caused many eyes around to look at us. Humans are a species of puppets. In order to show their closeness to beastmen, they often call their beastmen by their names in front of the crowd. Only I let Jiang Lin call me master and became different. They didn't know that in my previous life, I had too much of Lu Yuan, making him more and more arrogant. Not only did he dare to call me by my name, he also gradually encroached on my position in the Lu family. Whether the relationship between humans and beastmen is good or not does not depend on the title. But the word master that Jiang Lin used was clearly intentional to show off our close relationship. I glared at him, thinking to myself, this kid is really full of tricks. I walked forward with Jiang Lin, handing the congratulatory gift to Li Tianshan. He didn't even look, just waved his hand for the maid beside him to receive it. He looked bad, stopping on me. "Chan Tran, after not seeing you for several months, you've become more and more beautiful. Do you still remember our engagement?" Li Tianshan and I had an engagement when we were young. In my previous life, because I wanted to be with Locke and Gwen, I personally broke off this engagement to prove my sacrifice. At that time, Lai Tianhuan of course immediately agreed. How could he not happily refuse a woman who had ruined her appearance? Later, when I died tragically in the dark, he didn't even bother to look at me once. But in this life, I was still the second young lady of the Lu family, both talented and beautiful. Therefore, he quickly found a way to accept this engagement. I didn't have any sympathy for this smooth-talking man. "Sorry," I curled my lips and smiled, "Young Master Lai, I only like strong, talented men." I learned from the way he looked at me, his eyes looking up and down, his tone full of sarcasm. If it was a skinny dog, it wouldn't be as good as my beastmen, right? Lai Tianhuan's face darkened, gritting his teeth. "How can you compare me to such rude beastmen?" I raised my eyebrows, my voice full of provocation. "Then let your beastman fight my beastman and see." If your beast man loses, we will cancel our childhood engagement. How about it, young Master Li, do you dare? Li Tianxun clearly didn't want to mumble this ridiculous suggestion. I deliberately teased, what, young Master Li, who is famous for liking to abuse beastmen, is not confident? Then is it possible that the entire Li family doesn't have a single beastman? Indeed, a man who is eager to win like him has no brain. Li Tianxun was immediately irritated, and laughed coldly. I'm just afraid that the beastmen of the Li family are too strong, and will accidentally kill your useless dog. Jiang Lin stood beside me, his cold eyes making people shiver. It was unclear whether he was angry because Li Tianxun mocked him as a waste, or was upset because Li Tianxun and I had an engagement. Being stared at by Jiang Lin's gaze, Li Tianxun felt uncomfortable and pushed Lu Yuan away. Don't let me down, you know the consequences if you lose. There, looking at Lu Yuan's frightened eyes, I knew he was thinking about the beastmen who had been stripped to pieces in the Li family's basement. But when he saw Jiang Lin as his opponent, the fighting blood of a wolf in him boiled again. Perhaps he thought that as long as he could eliminate Jiang Lin, he could return to my side. At this moment, his eyes were like a wild beast, aimed straight at Jiang Lin's neck. I remember very clearly, before he died, he also looked at me with such eyes. There was no doubt that Lu Yuan had truly had murderous intent. Before Jiang Lin stepped onto the stage, I leaned into his ear and whispered, "You must come back alive." In the middle of the field, a temporary stage was quickly set up. Lu Yuan took off his uniform, revealing his rippling muscles, his body full of scars and a chest full of scars. Completely different from Jiang Lin, wearing a white shirt, looking thin and slender. Lu Ruyan stood beside him, curling her lips and smiling coldly. You really pushed Jiang Lin to his death. Lu Yuan is a werewolf, he has killed countless beastmen in the Li family's arena. Now killing a dog like him, to him, is no different than stepping on an ant. I didn't care, I found a good seat to watch. On the stage, Lu Yuan smiled mockingly. With just this small body, you dare to fight me? Jiang Lin raised his jet-black eyes, bright as obsidian. Looking at him, his eyes were cold, emotionless, and contained heavy killing intent. I was used to the little dog's enthusiastic appearance, now I realized that when he wasn't smiling, Jiang Lin's expression could be as cold as ice, making others terrified. The two of them entered the arena. Before the whistle could even sound, Lu Yuan took the initiative, rushing to attack him. Precisely, biting straight into Jiang Lin's neck. The sound of broken bones echoed, terrifying in the large banquet hall. Jiang Lin's eyes widened, trying to struggle but couldn't escape. At that moment, Locking Gwyn secretly took out the sleeping drug hidden in his palm and sprinkled it on John Lamb's nose and mouth. His experience from the arena, his will to survive, and his hatred for John Lamb made him willing to use any despicable means to win. Seeing John Lamb gradually losing consciousness, Lai Tianthuan smiled smugly. Chan Tran, your dog is about to be bitten to death. If you beg, maybe I'll tell the werewolf to let it go. I didn't even bother to spare him a glance, just silently looked at John Lamb. The man who once ruled both the human world and the beast world couldn't possibly be defeated so easily. In his previous life, he had killed a bloody path by himself, changing his fate. In this life, I had helped him so much, could it be that he was even weaker than in his previous life? Seeing John Lamb gradually lose the light in his eyes, I clenched my fists and whispered. Jiang Lin, if you lose, I will have to marry Li Tianxun. As if he heard me, his ears moved slightly, then suddenly his jet-black eyes gradually turned red. A trace of blood flashed. Just as Lu Yuan was about to launch the finishing blow, Jiang Lin suddenly jumped up, his slender fingernails instantly transformed into sharp claws, straight into Lu Yuan's chest. 3 deep wounds, flesh torn open, exposing bones, causing Lu Yuan to fall to the ground, his whole body convulsing. Jiang Lin stood up, his body tensed, his arms raised high, preparing to launch the final finishing blow. At this moment, I suddenly realized the problem. It turned out that in this life, because he was afraid of hurting me, Jiang Lin had always deliberately suppressed his animalistic nature when he was with me. So over time, his true strength was also hidden. But now, when he was pushed to the brink of life and death and stimulated by the smell of blood, his instincts completely erupted. Not dead, not stopping. Li Tianshan shouted in panic, "Lu Jingjing, what are you still standing there for? Quickly tell your beast man to stop." He wasn't worried about Lu Yuan's life, but rather because he noticed something unusual in Jiang Lin's eyes. A beast man who should have been tamed by humans had such an arrogant gaze. This was beyond the limit he could accept. Perhaps he wouldn't even hesitate to kill a human. Li Tianshan no longer paid attention to the fight. He ordered the guards to rush into the arena to restrain Jiang Lin, but in no time, one by one, Jiang Lin was sent flying off the stage. Jiang Lin had completely lost control, causing the entire banquet hall to fall into chaos with screams and panicked crowds. In that chaotic scene, I slowly stood up, slightly raising my eyebrows. "Jiang Lin, enough, go back." Jiang Lin paused. His sharp claws stopped right in front of Lu Yuan's neck, just a little bit away from tearing him in half. Instead, Jiang Lin pulled his hand back, digging his claws deep into the railing of the arena, making a terrifying sound. I turned to Li Tianshan and smiled sweetly. "Young Master Li, it seems that our engagement can be cancelled." Li Tianshan's face darkened. Losing face in front of the crowd made him extremely angry. The marriage between the Li family and the Lu family was originally a mutually beneficial cooperation, but now, the duck that was in their mouths flew away. And once the Li family got angry, it would definitely be disadvantageous to the Lu family. I quickly thought of a way. Actually, the one who originally wanted to marry Li Tianshan was Lu Ruyan, but that was only because she pushed me out as a substitute. Now it was time to return this to its original owner. I glanced at Lu Ruyan, the implication was clear. "Young Master Li, the Lu family doesn't only have one daughter." Li Tianshan's gaze immediately changed. It was obvious that he had other plans as well. I pulled Jiang Lin's hand, preparing to leave, but Lu Yuan's weak voice rang out from behind. "Zhangjing, don't go." I turned my head and saw him leaning against the railing of the arena, covered in blood, breathing heavily as if he was about to faint. "Chan, I'm seriously injured, can't you see? I'm in a lot of pain. I really know I'm wrong, please take me away from here. I promise to treat you well. I will never betray you again, can you believe me this time?" His voice sounded pitiful and sincere, but in my previous life I had tasted enough of his lies. In this life, I didn't hesitate to expose the stupidity and cruelty in his heart. "Locke and Gwen, you didn't come back to beg me because you knew you were wrong, it's just because you had no other choice." I curled my lips, my eyes filled with mockery. "I've always wondered one thing, the person you love the most is clearly Lu Nuyen. But why are you so stubborn in wanting to get close to me in this life? This doesn't make sense at all. I didn't choose you to be a beast. You should have found every way to get close to her. But looking at you like this, it seems like you don't want to get close to her at all." I laughed coldly and continued, "Let me guess. You were reborn at the same time as me, right? Because after you bit my neck, not long after, Lu Ruyan killed you. Is that right?" Lu Yuan paused, his eyes wide open in surprise. His face was red with embarrassment and shame. I stared at him, merciless. My voice was as sharp as a knife. Perhaps you don't know, but in your previous life, Lu Rian ordered someone to set fire to your room. She wanted to put on a heroic act of saving a beauty to strengthen your loyalty to her. But unexpectedly, the fire spread so quickly, she was afraid of being implicated, so she left you to burn to death. In her eyes, the lives of beast men are worthless. If one wolf dies, go out and buy another one. My eyes turned cold, fixed on Lu Yuan's pale face. As for me, regardless of everything, I rushed into the sea of fire to save him. The result was half of his face was burned away. But in return, he betrayed me. Lu Yuan kept shaking his head, his voice trembling. Impossible. Lu Rian would never do that to me. She is the kindest and most beautiful girl I have ever met. You are lying. Looking at his self-deception, I could only laugh. At this moment, Lu Yuan's half-face mask slid down, revealing his scarred face. Lu Rian walked past, raised her hand to cover her nose, revealing a look of disgust, and said without any restraint, "You are really ugly and useless." Locking Nguyen was stunned, staring blankly at the back of Lu Nuyen leaving. After a while, he trembled and covered half of his face with his hand, crying and laughing like a madman when his illusion of the girl he loved the most was brutally shattered. Locking Nguyen completely collapsed, but I didn't bother to pay attention to his feelings. I just smiled and made a suggestion related to revenge. After returning to the Lu family's house, I saw Zhang Lam leaning against the door frame, his arms crossed in front of his chest, his eyes flashing a bit of red. "Master, I'm really curious. What did you and that wolf talk about that made you come back so late?" I suddenly realized that Zhang Lam seemed to have matured after awakening his animal instincts. His body was taller, his shoulders were steadier, and even his eyes had become deep. When I raised my head, my gaze accidentally fell on his slightly heaving chest, and my face suddenly turned red. Jianlin suddenly wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me closer. His lips lightly brushed the corner of my lips. His voice was low. "Master, where were you looking just now?" His hand was as hot as fire, making me startled. He quickly straightened his face. What are you doing? You're really rude." I tried to act stern to hide my confusion, but Jianlin was not subdued like usual. His face got closer and closer. His warm breath blew on my neck, making my heart beat faster. "Master, I'm not a child anymore." His hoarse voice rang out, carrying an unpredictable ambiguity. "According to the age of a beast man, I'm an adult." He emphasized the two words adult, making the meaning of his words even more ambiguous. I reached out to push him away, but before I could touch him, his fingertip was already in my mouth. He was like a docile dog biting the bone his master gave him. Jianlin's eyes flashed with a faint layer of bone, gradually turning red. The unruly beast ears moved repeatedly, his claws were restless, lightly touching my fingers, as if he had to bite something to feel at ease. Looking at Jianlin in front of me, gradually transforming into a beast, alarm bells rang in my head. That's right, beast men would enter heat soon after they matured, but I didn't expect Jianlin's heat to come so quickly. "Master." His voice was hoarse, his eyes were burning, he couldn't hold back anymore. I hurriedly pulled him, throwing him into the bathtub filled with cold water. Unexpectedly, with just a slight pull, I also fell down with him, water splashing everywhere. The hazy spring light covered me. In the end I couldn't leave that bathtub for the entire night. The next morning, Lu Ruyan's cries echoed throughout the Lu family home. "Father, I don't want to marry Li Tianshan." I hugged my sore back, and walked out to watch the excitement. It turned out that after I refused the engagement, I hinted at Li Tianshan a little, and he immediately came to propose to Lu Ruyan. My father frowned, his voice heavy. The marriage with the Li family has been decided a long time ago. It's not like you said you didn't want to marry, so you won't marry. Lu Ruyan glared at me, angrily shouting. It's all your fault. Why did you bet with Li Tianshan? The one who should have married was me. I pretended to be innocent, but sister, the first person to be engaged to young Master Li was you. You always praised him for being handsome, elegant, gentle, and kind. You couldn't bear to give it to me, but now, he voluntarily broke off the engagement with me to marry you. Aren't you happy? Lu Ruyan choked, her eyes looking at her father for help, but he just stared at her, his expression full of helplessness. With red eyes, Lu Ruyan hissed. Father, you are indeed biased towards Lu Qingzhen. You know clearly how cruel Li Tianshan is, yet you still force me to marry him. You just want to abandon me like you abandoned my mother in the past. Her words were like a knife stabbing at his old wound, causing him to angrily shout. Lu Ruyan, are you crazy? Yes, you're crazy. She laughed coldly, tears welling up in her eyes. All this time you've been crazy because you wanted to be recognized by your father, but have you ever looked at me? In your eyes, there's only Lu Tianshan. She shouted, then suddenly pulled out a knife and rushed towards me. Lu Tianshan, I hate you. Why don't you disappear? What right do you have to take away everything that belongs to me? The surprise made me panic, and I took a few steps back. I had expected that Lu Ruyan would act too much after knowing that she had to marry Li Tianshan, but I didn't expect her to be this crazy. Just as the blade was about to touch me, a white figure rushed forward to block me. The blade stabbed straight into Jiang Lin's chest. The red blood from the wound quickly soaked his white shirt. Jiang Lin. I panicked, pressing my hand against his chest to stop the bleeding, but Jiang Lin didn't cry out in pain. On the contrary, he looked at me and smiled. Luckily, the master is fine. This idiot, he didn't know that I was just using him, but he still poured his heart and soul into me. Looking at the hot blood mixed with tears on my hands, my heart suddenly sank. A few days after that day, Lu Ruyan escaped from the Lu family home with Locke and Gwen. In the most desperate moments of pain, people always easily collapse. And Locke and Gwen took that opportunity to approach her, using the same tricks that had charmed me in my previous life to seduce her. Not long after, she was so infatuated with him that she left everything behind, family, corporation, and even her pride, to be a gentle little wife by his side. But Lu Ruyan didn't know, that reign of liberation was the trap I had set. I wanted her to taste all the suffering I had endured in my previous life in the arena. That day, I made a deal with Locke and Gwen. If he makes Lu Ruyan fall in love with him and then betray her when she is happiest, I will allow him to come back to me. Locke and Gwen did as he promised. When Lu Ruyan trusted him completely, he coldly told her that it was all just an act, that in his heart, the only person he loved was still me. His words were like a knife stabbing into her heart. Lu Ruyan went completely crazy and collapsed. But when she became too troublesome, Locke and Gwen did not hesitate to take action, biting her to death on the spot. After finishing everything, Locke and Gwen happily came to see me, waiting for praise and acceptance, but I just calmly took out my phone and called the police. A beast man just killed someone, needs to be dealt with. When the police took him away, Locke and Gwen's eyes were filled with pain and despair. Lu Tianshan, you lied to me. You said you would let me come back to you. I bowed and smiled faintly. Lu Yuan, what do you think that I would forgive a traitor? Returning home, I saw Jiang Lin leaning against the door frame, his eyes filled with reproach. It turns out that the master has been busy lately because of these things. The wound on his chest had healed completely, but his face showed clear dissatisfaction because I rarely visited him. "What about you? You've been busy lately, right? It must be the same as in your previous life." I glanced at the beast man tiger standing next to him, looking respectfully at him like a guard. I secretly understood that Lu Rian had nothing to do with this tiger anymore. Not long after that, my father, falling seriously ill, caused the Lu group to fall into crisis, no different from a ship losing its rudder in the middle of the ocean. Too many forces were eyeing the lucrative bait that was the Lu family, eagerly rushing in to compete. In a moment of urgency, my father was forced to hand over full control of the group to me. I quickly grasped everything, running the company skillfully, without any loopholes, like a hungry shark. I silently swam among what my father and Lu Rian left behind, taking over each piece one by one, and making it all my own. It was only when he discovered this that my father was stunned and asked, "Xingzheng, you had arranged all of this in advance, right?" I just looked at him silently, not answering. My father had lived a selfish life. He was not a good husband, not a good father, and did not even deserve to be called a good person. He betrayed my mother to love his lover, but in the end, he returned to my family for his own benefit. After seizing all of my mother's family's assets, he still brought his lover and his illegitimate child home. He even wanted to hand over the Lu family to Lu Rian. Lu Rian was so stupid that she didn't realize her father's favoritism. She also couldn't see through the hypocrisy in his loving appearance towards me. My father didn't understand why I, the daughter who had always been patient, had become like this, but he also knew fear and regret. "Xingzheng, it's good that you inherit the Lu family. I've always loved you the most, you know that. I love your mother very much." I looked at the silver-haired man lying on the hospital bed and laughed coldly. "Dad, save these lies to tell your mother in the other world. Tell them to your mother's family, the people who were killed by your father." After saying that, I signed the papers and sent him to a nursing home right in front of him. It was a remote, cold place for the elderly who were no longer able to take care of themselves. And that would be where he would live out his final days. Many years later, Jiang Lin became the leader of both the human and beast worlds. At the negotiating table, he firmly led the way, introducing important changes to the law. In the end, truly realizing equality between humans and beast men. It was rumored that Jiang Lin's success was not only due to his superior intelligence and strength, but also due to the secret support of a large corporation. I didn't care about those rumors. I only knew that Jiang Lin, the powerful man in a neat suit, when facing the world, after returning to the Lu family, would change into soft pajamas and rest his head on my arm. His eyes were sparkling like a loyal dog. He looked at me, his gaze both passionate and obedient. "Master,